US President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all car and light truck imports into the country.
Anywhere from $600 billion to $1 trillion will be taken in over the relatively short-term period, meaning
Trump is betting big that these tariff plans will revive US manufacturing and boost jobs.
5 global car giants just left the United States, and almost no one is talking about it. Their exit wasn't announced. It didn't come with headlines or political debates. It happened in silence, through contract cancellations, supplier shutdowns, and factories going dark. These weren't layoffs, they were warning shots. Why did they leave now? What does it mean when more are already planning the same move? And how is it going to affect you? Ford, the detour to Ontario. Ford Motor Company has always been more than just a car maker. It is a symbol of American industrial might, a brand etched into the foundation of Detroit, Midwest labor identity, and national automotive heritage. The blue oval meant American steel, American roads, and American jobs. So when Ford announced in early 2025 that it would expand battery and electric vehicle production, not in Michigan, not in Ohio, but in Ontario, Canada, it wasn't just a logistical move. It was a turning point. The announcement followed President Donald Trump's proposal at a Pennsylvania steel plant to double steel import tariffs to 50%. The stated goal was to protect American industry from foreign manipulation, but the effect on automakers was immediate and punishing. Steel costs skyrocketed within weeks. Ford, like many large manufacturers, relies on both domestic and international suppliers, but with 50% tariffs now hammering imported steel, Ford's Midwest plants were caught in the crossfire of economic nationalism. Within days of the announcement, Ford executives met in closed-door sessions. The message was clear. Manufacturing in the United States under these new trade conditions was no longer sustainable for the company's most critical products. And so, in a sharp pivot, Ford finalized a high-level deal with Canadian officials to relocate a significant portion of its electric vehicle and battery production north of the border. Ontario offered a different future, one with lower steel costs, direct access to Canadian-controlled lithium and rare earth mineral supplies, and a business environment that wasn't shifting on every speech from Washington. Ford had already established strong Canadian operations over decades. Now those investments would deepen with new hiring programs, supplier contracts, and cross-border logistics replacing expansion plans once meant for American soil. The stakes climbed even higher when the Trump administration fired back. In response to Ford's relocation and Canadian tax incentives, the White House floated a retaliatory tariff, 200% on electric vehicles manufactured abroad. The move was intended to shock Ford back into compliance. Instead, it confirmed the company's worst fears, that trade policy was now a political weapon, fired without warning. Rather than provoke a public fight, Ford continued its shift quietly. In February 2025, the company halted 2 major expansion projects in the American Midwest, including a battery plant in northern Indiana and an assembly line upgrade in Dearborn, Michigan. In their place, a hiring surge was announced in Ontario. Canadian job boards lit up with postings from Ford for plant operators, battery engineers, software specialists, and logistics personnel. American suppliers felt the ripple immediately. At least 8 Tier 1 and Tier 2 component manufacturers that had long served Ford's Midwest factories reported contract reductions. Some were told to relocate or register subsidiaries in Canada if they wanted to maintain long-term supply relationships. Others, already struggling with high material costs and labor shortages, began layoffs. Ford's move was not made lightly. Internally, executives were reportedly divided. Some argued that the optics of leaving the U.S., especially during a tariff fight, would alienate loyal customers and provoke further government scrutiny. But the finance and global strategy teams overruled. The math simply didn't lie. Under the new tariff environment, every vehicle Ford produced with imported steel, foreign electronics, or battery components came with unpredictable overhead. Forecasting had become impossible. Profitability was vanishing. And worse, Ford's long-term stability was now at the mercy of a tweet or podium threat. The consequences extend far beyond Ford itself. As the company adapts to survive, its competitors are watching. General Motors, Stellantis, and Toyota have all held quiet strategy meetings in the wake of Ford's decision. If Ontario can offer policy stability, access to minerals, and tariff-free steel, then what reason remains to expand inside the United States? The question is no longer theoretical. It is practical, financial, and immediate. This is not about abandoning America. It is about escaping a policy landscape where today's incentives incentives become tomorrow's punishments. Ford's relocation is not just a change in factory address, it's a declaration, a warning, a shift in gravity. The company that invented the assembly line in Detroit is now placing its bets on Canadian soil, and not because it wants to, but because, under current conditions, it has to. Workers in Michigan and Indiana are left asking what happens next. Will those paused projects resume? Will jobs return if tariffs are lifted? Or is this the new normal, an industry quietly packing its bags while political slogans echo over empty shop floors? If you thought America's oldest automaker shifting north was bad, the next company went further. They're shutting down United States factories and leaving behind empty showrooms. We didn't just read headlines. We tracked factory closures, shipment logs, and supplier contracts. If you're here for what the news won't say out loud, hit like and subscribe now. Stellantis, the vanishing brands. The appeal of Ram trucks has always been rooted in American grit, a rugged frame, dependable torque, and a look that says, built to last. Ram became synonymous with Midwestern resilience and working-class pride. From the factory floors of Sterling Heights to dealership lots across the heartland, Ram symbolized more than just horsepower. It stood for American manufacturing. That identity is now collapsing because the very nation that built Ram into a powerhouse is now driving it out with a policy wall of tariffs and trade penalties so steep, even patriotism cannot pay the price. Stellantis, the multinational parent company of Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and Chrysler, has not just made strategic adjustments in recent months, it has carried out a deliberate retreat from the United States. In the spring of 2025, Stellantis executives quietly confirmed that two major assembly plants, one in Belvidere, Illinois, and the other in Kokomo, Indiana, would halt operations indefinitely. Combined, these facilities once supported over 4,000 American jobs. Now they sit idle. And it is not because the vehicles are no longer selling. Jeep and Ram remain top-performing nameplates. The issue is no longer demand. It is survival in a tariff-choked market. Stellantis leadership pointed directly to what they termed tariff misalignment. Translated from corporate diplomacy, that means this. Under current trade policy, it costs significantly more to build a Dodge Durango or a Ram 1500 in the United States than it does to build the exact same vehicle in Mexico or Poland and ship it back. The reason is the uneven, unpredictable tariff structure that punishes companies for sourcing parts from abroad, even when those parts are critical and have no domestic equivalents. From semiconductors to battery modules, the new tariff regime has turned routine sourcing into a financial minefield. This is not speculative. Stellantis has already ramped up operations at its Ramos Arizpe plant in Mexico and its Tychy facility in Poland. These plants are now absorbing the production that used to power American towns. What once came out of Detroit in Indiana now ships from European ports and Mexican rail hubs. This is not a rumor or projection. This is current reality unfolding across supply chains and contract ledgers in real time. One of the most symbolic casualties of this shift is Chrysler. Once a pillar of Detroit's Big Three, Chrysler is now a ghost brand with an uncertain future. Stellantis had previously teased plans to reinvent Chrysler as a cutting-edge electric vehicle division, but insiders now report that those plans are being redrawn around European manufacturing capacity instead of United States investment. The vision of a revitalized Chrysler producing electric sedans and crossovers on American soil is slipping away, not because the vehicles are flawed, but because the policy environment is hostile. The implications are enormous. Every factory that shuts down in Illinois or Indiana means lost wages, lost tax revenue, and lost economic ripple effects for entire counties. Every shift that moves to Poland or Mexico means fewer suppliers in Ohio, fewer trucking routes through Missouri, and fewer reasons for American logistics firms to maintain local fleets. This is not just an automaker's strategic play, it is an economic chain reaction. And what makes the Stellantis case so alarming is the timing. In the same quarter that the White House doubled steel tariffs to 50% and threatened 200% penalties on specific vehicle imports, Stellantis had no choice but to shield itself. Unlike startups or smaller manufacturers, Stellantis cannot afford short-term losses or political gambles. Its global shareholders demand certainty, and certainty at this moment no longer resides in the United States. Dealerships are already feeling the tremors. Inventory for Dodge and Jeep models assembled in America is thinning out. Meanwhile, models sourced from overseas are being pushed harder in marketing materials, even though shipping times are longer and customization options more limited. American customers are watching as their choices shrink, while dealerships explain rising prices, longer delivery windows, and features being removed from base models due to supply disruption, a phrase now synonymous with policy failure. Worker response has been swift and angry. Union leaders in Illinois and Indiana have staged protests, lobbied state officials, and issued formal complaints to the Department of Labor. But the federal government's hands are tied. Tariff policy does not fall under labor protection laws, and executive orders do not require congressional approval to reshape trade policy. The rules were changed at the top, and the workers at the bottom were left with pink slips and shuttered cafeterias. And if Stellantis sounds like a wake-up call, the next entry might break your heart, because it is not just a company leaving, it is a symbol. Harley-Davidson, the Patriots retreat. At the heart of Harley-Davidson's brand identity lies the appeal of raw Americana, chrome, thunderous exhausts, open highways, and Milwaukee steel. For over 120 years, Harley has stood as a living emblem of American craftsmanship and mechanical rebellion. The Pan America, the Sportster S, and the Nightster were supposed to usher in a new chapter, a bold transformation that blended the company's iconic legacy with future-facing innovation. These bikes were engineered not just for showrooms, but for storytelling. Adventure-ready, tech-savvy, and dripping with rugged freedom, riders saw these models as symbols of national pride and continuity, of a company willing to evolve while remaining loyal to its roots. But in the spring of 2025, that loyalty collapsed under pressure not from consumers or critics, but from Washington's tariff policies. 3 of Harley-Davidson's most ambitious models are no longer made in Wisconsin. Instead, they are now manufactured in Rayong, Thailand, a decision that stunned both analysts and American workers. And while some may assume the move was about cheaper labor or more lenient regulations, that assumption misses the point entirely. The tipping point came in early 2025, when the European Union and several Southeast Asian economies retaliated against the United States' steel and aluminum tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. These countries targeted American-made motorcycles with import duties of up to 60%. For Harley-Davidson, which sells a significant volume of motorcycles abroad, especially in high-growth emerging markets, the cost spike was unbearable. For every motorcycle made in the United States and exported overseas, the company would lose money, even with price increases. The margins collapsed, shareholders panicked, the boardroom pivoted. Faced with a stark choice, either eat massive losses to maintain American manufacturing or shift production offshore to avoid the tariffs, Harley made a decision it never wanted to announce: to relocate production of the Pan America, Sportster S, and Nightster to Thailand. These were not minor models. The Pan America was Harley's flagship adventure touring motorcycle, meant to compete globally with BMW's GS Series and Honda's Africa Twin. The Sportster S had been marketed as a return to lightweight performance, a reboot of Harley's younger, urban demographic. And the Nightster carried on the storied lineage of the original Sportster lineup, revived with a liquid-cooled engine and stripped-back style that resonated with purists and new riders alike. With these 3 models gone from domestic production, Harley-Davidson shattered an illusion many had clung to for years, that some brands were simply too American to leave. The news hit hard in Milwaukee and Menomonee Falls, where thousands of employees suddenly faced an uncertain future. For decades, these plants were seen as untouchable, symbols of American industrial heritage, with workers who had generational ties to the factory floor. But as one plant worker put it in a local interview, "We didn't lose our jobs because we failed. We lost them because our own government made it impossible to keep them." Harley's executives, of course, spun the move as a global strategy. The company emphasized that its decision would streamline operations, enhance supply chain flexibility, and improve access to foreign markets. But the language could not mask the deeper truth. The American market had become too risky for its own champions. Tariffs were supposed to protect brands like Harley-Davidson. Instead, they became a wrecking ball, smashing supply chains, distorting export costs, and forcing a brutal choice between patriotism and profitability. Harley chose to live, even if that meant leaving home. The irony is brutal. The same administration that promised to restore American manufacturing inadvertently engineered its slow-motion departure. And for Harley, a company that has wrapped itself in stars and stripes for over a century, the optics are devastating. Customers have started asking questions. If their motorcycle is no longer made in the United States, is it still a Harley? Is the rebel machine still rebellious when it escapes tariffs through overseas assembly lines? The brand's leadership insists the answer is yes, that the soul of Harley lives in its engineering, its rider culture, its sound and spirit. But on showroom floors, the absence of a made in the United States stamp has changed the conversation. Meanwhile, Harley's competitors are seizing the moment. Indian Motorcycle, still assembling most of its lineup in the United States, has launched launched ad campaigns celebrating its domestic production. BMW and KTM, with more stable international networks, are targeting Harley's disillusioned adventure segment. Even Japanese brands like Yamaha and Honda, though also affected by tariffs, have more flexibility in relocating specific models without damaging their national identity. Harley-Davidson, boxed into its branding, had nowhere to hide, and now it's using a passport it never wanted. And if Harley's exit felt personal, the next company made it strategic, because they didn't just move plants, they moved the future. Tesla, Europe says no. Tesla's Cybertruck was supposed to be the bold, unmistakably American answer to a world of quiet electric utility vehicles. With its unpainted stainless steel body, futuristic lines, and brash design, it was built to dominate highways and headlines alike. Tesla called it the next evolution of transport, an all-electric tank that could tow more than 14,000 pounds, accelerate from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, and survive a sledgehammer to the doors. And for a while, the world paid attention. But in the second quarter of the year 2025, Tesla made a decision that sent a different kind of shockwave through the automotive world. It suspended all shipments of the Cybertruck and Model Y to Europe. This was not a temporary production delay or a shipping hiccup. It was a strategic retreat, an admission that one of Tesla's largest international markets had become too unpredictable to justify continued exports from the United States. While some analysts chalked it up to softening demand or logistical strain, the truth was far more complicated. Tesla's decision marked the first time in its history that the company deliberately reduced domestic factory utilization, not because of supply constraints, but to protect global earnings. What went wrong? The answer lies in a tangled web of policy backlash, labor resistance, and a regulatory climate that Tesla's leadership could no longer navigate. In Germany, union pressure against Tesla's autonomous assembly lines escalated into a continent-wide boycott. In France and the Netherlands, software compliance requirements, once overlooked or tolerated, suddenly became rigid enforcement mechanisms. Even basic over-the-air software updates required months of approval under new consumer protection laws. Then came the carbon origin mandates, a growing list of European Union regulations that penalized electric vehicles manufactured in plants using non-renewable energy sources. Tesla's massive factories in Texas and California, which still rely in part on fossil fuel-based grids, failed to meet the criteria. Meanwhile, import duties crept upward. In retaliation for United States tariffs on European steel and automobiles, the European Commission quietly raised duties on electric vehicles manufactured outside the European Union. By the time the Cybertruck was ready to ship, the total cost to deliver a single unit into Europe exceeded 30% above its domestic retail price. Worse, European regulators began investigating Tesla's self-driving claims under deceptive marketing statutes. What was once a welcome disruption became a compliance nightmare. So Elon Musk made the call. Production of European-bound vehicles would now shift exclusively to the Berlin Gigafactory and the Shanghai plant. This allowed Tesla to benefit from favorable trade terms, local labor policies, and less aggressive import regimes. The decision reduced strain on the Fremont and Austin plants, but also signaled something deeper, that Tesla no longer trusted the policy environment in the United States to support its international ambitions. Behind closed doors, Tesla executives revealed to investors that Musk had greenlit all new expansion in tariff-safe zones only. That meant no new projects in Texas, no additional capacity in California. Instead, eyes turned toward regions with long-term regulatory predictability, places like the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. The fallout within the United States was immediate, even if it was quiet. Suppliers who depended on Tesla's export pipeline saw future contracts frozen. Engineers recruited for scaling Cybertruck production found themselves reassigned or delayed. Tesla never issued a full press release. They did not have to. The shift was visible in shipping manifests, dock activity, and foreign investor briefings. American-made Teslas were not heading to foreign markets anymore, and that gap was not being filled with new domestic orders. At the core of this decision was a shift in Tesla's risk calculus. For years, the company thrived on volatility. It bet against convention, leaned into controversy, and often won. But tariffs, especially the new 50% rate on foreign parts, and the cascading cascading retaliation from trade partners introduced a level of unpredictability that even Tesla could not model. When a single announcement from Washington could increase the price of key components overnight, long-term planning became impossible. Even Tesla's legendary supply chain resilience began to crack under the weight of shifting tariffs. Batteries sourced from Korea were suddenly slapped with dual-country penalties. Semiconductors routed through Malaysia were delayed in customs for new inspections. Labor unions in Italy and Sweden threatened blockades if Tesla continued bypassing local labor standards. It became too much. In boardrooms and earnings calls, the word reliability replaced innovation as Tesla's top logistical priority. Yet this was more than a production realignment. It was a cultural fracture. Tesla, once proud to manufacture in America for the world, now sees its American plants as limited-use facilities, excellent for domestic demand, but not flexible enough for volatile international conditions. Tesla is not abandoning the United States, but it is clearly hedging against it. And finally, while Tesla's retreat was global, the last company made a clean break from the United States altogether, and did it without saying a word. Honda, the quiet exit. No one saw coming. There is something almost surgical about how Honda made its move. No headline, no political fight, no emotional press release invoking American workers or community roots. Honda, one of the most reliable and historically committed automotive manufacturers in the United States, has walked out of the room without making a sound. And yet, the echo it left behind is deafening. It all begins with a model many Americans trusted for decades, the Honda Accord Hybrid. Sleek, fuel-efficient, modest in design, but packed with the kind of dependability that made it a household name. The Accord Hybrid was more than just a car. For Honda, it was a flagship in its transition to electrified mobility. And for American factory workers in Ohio, it was a job, a livelihood, a steady rhythm of production that kept local economies alive. But in early 2025, that rhythm stopped abruptly. Hybrid systems rely heavily on imported components, most critically, lithium-ion batteries and electric drive modules sourced from East and Southeast Asia. In the past, Honda could balance import costs with US-based assembly. But in January of 2025, newly imposed tariffs on Asian-origin battery cells and power electronics pushed those costs beyond profitability. Honda's North American leadership had to make a choice: either pass the costs on to consumers and destroy their competitive edge, or restructure where the cars were made. They chose the latter. In March, Honda executives quietly terminated upcoming expansion plans at their Alabama plant. In April, they suspended negotiations with key suppliers in Kentucky and Tennessee. By May, shipments of Accord hybrids began arriving from Saitama, Japan, not Marysville, Ohio. The vehicle itself remained the same. What changed was its origin and its implications. America did not lose a product. America lost production. What stung most wasn't that Honda left. It was how they did it. There was no grand announcement, no final statement thanking American workers for decades of loyalty, no White House visit. It was simply a shift in the supply manifest, a rerouting of containers, a quiet phone call to suppliers telling them they would not be needed this summer. For those on the receiving end, it felt less like rejection and more like abandonment. At dealerships across the Midwest, managers now stare at empty slots on the lot where hybrid models once sat. Allocation updates are slow and shipments inconsistent. In cities like Cleveland, Indianapolis, and Kansas City, dealers report wait times of over 6 weeks for basic trims. Fleet orders are delayed indefinitely. Customers looking to trade up are being told to wait or to settle for a gas-only model. There is no domestic backlog to draw from. Honda has not only stopped producing in America, it has stopped planning for production here entirely. This isn't a blip. This is part of a deeper recalibration. Internal Honda memos, leaked to industry reporters, reveal a long-term strategy focused on protecting operational stability from political turbulence. The United States used to be that safe zone, but now Japan and India are rising as more stable alternatives. Japan for its controlled trade environment and high-tech manufacturing capacity. India for its rapidly modernizing infrastructure and trade neutrality. Executives in Tokyo and Delhi are not dealing with overnight tariffs, tweet-based policy shifts, or regulatory whiplash. In the US, the rules can change between one quarter and the next. For a company that makes its margin on consistency, that volatility is fatal. Honda is not chasing cheap labor. They are chasing continuity, and they are finding it elsewhere. What does this mean for American workers? In the short term, it means layoffs. Not all at once, but slow, quiet reductions. Fewer shifts, fewer temporary hires, expiring contracts that do not get renewed, supplier networks unraveling one thread at a time. In Ohio, small firms that used to make subcomponents for hybrid systems metals, plastics, fasteners, wire harnesses are seeing orders disappear. One supplier told a local paper, "They didn't even fire us. They just stopped calling." In the long term, it means loss of trust. For decades, Honda was the model of American partnership. They built plants, hired locally, supported community colleges, and earned a reputation for being a stable, honorable employer. That reputation has taken a hit, not because Honda changed, but because America did. Tariffs, import duties, and regional political tension are now seen as deal breakers for investment. Other companies are watching this play out and taking notes. This is also about consumer trust. Buyers are not just price sensitive, they're loyalty sensitive. For years, many Americans bought Hondas because they believed in the company's commitment to American jobs. They liked knowing their car was made nearby. That belief is now fading. When customers ask if their Accord was built in Ohio and the answer is Japan, some shrug, others hesitate. Either way, the narrative is breaking down. The exits have started, the silence is breaking, and the map of American manufacturing is changing fast. If you felt that shift, hit like, comment which brand's move hit hardest, and subscribe because what's coming next isn't a slowdown, it's a stampede.